Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. It's been quite a busy day. Amid a month that has actually been quite quiet in certain respects, certainly the transfer window thus far, pretty much across the board, not even just at Spurs really. At least today, the Premier League fixtures were released. Honestly, I love this day. I do love this day. I know it sounds like a weird day to really enjoy, but I think June for me is often a month when it's like, I kind of start to feel like I really want proper football to come back. You know, the Euros have been quite fun. Some of the games, really enjoyed watching Radu Drăgușin yesterday for Romania, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But on the whole, I'm at that period where I've kind of had that little bit of time where I'm like, I hate football, I want to rest, I'm knackered, to feeling like, when does the season start again? I really want to go and watch football matches and report on them and cover everything that comes around them. And it's a little bit like getting your hope back. You know, like when a salamander loses a limb and it grows back. That's a little bit what hope is like for me when it comes to Tottenham Hotspur and football. I love the fact that next season Spurs have approximately 1 million matches to play, compared to what felt like about 7 last season. Yeah, look, I know it was 41. I am exaggerating, of course. But it was one more than the bare minimum of matches we could have had last season. There were so many long weeks or even fortnights, and not even international breaks, but fortnights of just Spurs aren't playing this weekend. So next season is going to be beautiful in that respect. It's a lot of it, I think, is to do with the expanded Europa League, which is going to play its part. So at the minimum, we know that Spurs will play 48 matches next season, because there are 8 group stage games in the Europa League. And I actually worked out what was the maximum. If they had the season from heaven and they played in every single game, in every competition, and just progressed, and we all had the most wonderful, exciting season. Technically, I guess they could play all the Premier League games, get relegated, but get to the final of all the other competitions. That would be a rubbish season. Yeah, of course it would. But I worked out 69 matches they would play across all competitions. I think Postecoglou had a 60-game season with Celtic and a 53-game season with them in his second year. But yeah, I would be happy with 69 games in the season would be lovely. That would mean ultimate success, I think. Well, hopefully, as long as they won those games and didn't get relegated, like I say. But it's just going to be games galore. Let's just take the first half of the season. 27 matches in around 17 weeks for Spurs. If we say there's 3 international breaks in the first half of the season, which is mad, before we even reach 2025. But if you take, let's say, a week off for each international break, because it's essentially kind of like a bit like Wednesday to Wednesday, isn't it? So if you take a week off for each of those, that's 17 weeks, 27 matches. That's minimum. So if they got through Carabao Cup 3rd round and 4th round, because they're in Europe, they're back to starting in the 3rd round. Woohoo! 1 round more than last year. That would be 29. So they'd have 29 if they got through a couple of rounds in the Carabao. I just love it. I do. You know what I'm like. If you've watched my videos, you know that the transfer window for me is just It's just a lot of people guessing, a lot of people kind of pushing stuff out there that isn't always entirely true, as we'll discuss as this video goes on. And also, there's no real club football to speak of. I love the fact that it's all coming back, even though technically it's not for a while yet, but it gives me hope. It does. And we've got something a bit different at the start of the season, an opening game that is not in the weekend of the opening weekend. Obviously, technically Friday could also be that, but Spurs are playing on the Monday night to start off against Leicester at the King Power Stadium, August the 19th. The Harry Winks derby, I guess we could call it, as weirdly that was the one, not weirdly I suppose it's expected, but that's the one he wanted to start the season. He said that in their social media Q&A they did, I think it was last week. That's where we start the season. I do like the King Power. There's been some rather dramatic games there for Tottenham over the years, some very good goals as well, some high scoring matches. So hopefully that's a good one. The first home game of the season will be Everton, the Rob Guest derby, on August the 24th currently, although that still could be moved due to broadcasting, just broadcasting really. Then comes a journey to Newcastle the following weekend. Please be a better trip to Newcastle than the last two, because they've been utterly pants. Then, early in the season, comes not only the first North London derby of the season, but a home North London derby. Very kind of rare in recent years to have it that way round, unless I'm mistaken. September the 14th for that, right after the first international break. I say September the 14th. Again, everything other than that first game right now is subject to being moved by broadcasters for when they want to show it. But I am looking forward to seeing a home one first, which would be quite interesting. Get off to a good start. That would be wonderful. I don't know why I did a really high-pitched voice there. So after that, actually back-to-back home games. You've got Arsenal and Brentford. Then there comes trip to Man United and Brighton. First game against Man City, which is always a bit of a doozy, is November 23rd. No derby against Chelsea until quite late in the year. Spurs host them on December the 7th this time. Obviously, we know about the fateful game. Was it November, wasn't it, last year? The Boxing Day trip is currently, it will still be, but it's whether it is Boxing Day or whether they move them about over those days over Christmas. But it is Nottingham Forest away, which means, yes, if you're not aware, 3 years in a row that Spurs have been away as their festive game. Forest a little bit longer of a trip than some of the recent ones. What was last year? It's gone out of my head. Please remind me. It's been a long day. It was an early start with the fixtures because we get them quite early on in the day. So that's that. Oh, there is one trend that has come to an end, though. Talking about 3 in a row. Spurs' final game of the season will be at home. And that is the first time, by the time it comes around, that Spurs have had a home game at, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in 6 years at that point, which is mad. The first season the Spurs Stadium opened that month, it was opened in April, wasn't it, officially? And in May, they had a game against Everton. That was the last time Spurs ended their season at home, which is weird. I don't know why that's been the case. But they will now finish this next season at home against Brighton on May the 25th. That one will remain as that day because that'll be the Sunday. Actually, pretty sure, it'll remain at 4 o'clock as well, won't it? So, yes, a home game against Brighton. They actually get to do the walk of honour, shame, whatever it ends up being, at home for the final game, which is obvious. No, actually, it would. I was about to say it wouldn't be the final game if they were to get through to the Europa League final, but actually that would be in the midweek before that. Unusually this time it is before the Premier League season ends. So it's an interesting one. Oh, just some other little ones if you weren't aware. The away North London derby comes early in 2025, January the 14th at the Emirates. And also something that I noticed, again, look, whenever you come out with the fixtures, there's always this kind of train of thought of you just play everyone twice. What does it matter? I get that, and I get a lot of people just put it down in that way. But for me, I do think the groupings of the games can be quite important. And that was one thing that struck me at this current stage before it's moved about, before postponements get in the way and rescheduling. It's actually quite an even set of fixtures in that, unless I'm mistaken, there's not even one instance of a back-to-back game against the top 6. That could change. But, when we look at what happened last season and the final games of the season, we had Newcastle, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool in a row. Then you had Burnley, which was a bit of a kind of a chance to breathe. And then straight into Man City as well before the final game against Sheffield United away. So that was 5 out of the last 7 games were against incredibly tough opposition. Whereas this year, you do have a trip to Liverpool and then West Ham. But then there's a home game against Palace, trip to Villa Park, and then it ends with that game against Brighton. So, some tough games still, but not the, the same kind of levels, I think is the way to put it. So yeah, I do think it makes a bit of a difference, the grouping. Kind of similar as if, I guess, if you had a grouping of really tough games in a row at the start of the season, a manager could suddenly be under pressure. Yeah, I do think it works. Yes, of course, you could quite logically argue, yeah, but if you get through that, then in the middle of the season, it might be an easier patch and things like that. But to me, I kind of feel like an even season is a better season. That will be judged. You know, you could quite rightly come back at the end of the season when it's all gone horribly wrong. Postecoglou's left the club and say, see, you muppet, look what you said at the start of the season. It's all your fault. But yeah, so that's the fixtures, really. I think that's kind of the main things to take. I'm not just going to read them all out. That would be pointless for all of us when you can just see them there. But I did a piece today, it's worth looking on my Twitter feed, where I kind of did the list, but then I inserted all of the Europa League dates, including the potential second half of the season ones, knockout rounds. Certainly with that, if you're Spurs, you really want to try to finish near the top of your group, because those below the top 8, if you haven't seen it already, they kind of come together in a bit of a main group. I don't know if it's slightly like the under-21s maybe system that we've seen this year, but if you're outside that top 8 in the overall standings, you have to play a playoff round. I think it's in February, which is 2 more games that you really will not need in your season at that point in midweek. Whereas if you finish in the top 8, you go straight to the round of 16, I think is in March. So you kind of skip a load of time. But that's the weird thing. We're used to European group stage football finishing in December, but it goes into January now with the extra games. So a lot of games. And yeah, you can tell I've done a podcast as well today because my voice is wrecked doing 2 things in a row. So yeah, so have a look at it, because it's got, like I said, Europa League fixtures and potential fixtures in it. It hasn't got the group stage names yet because we don't know that till, I think it's August we find out that, is it? I'm pretty sure there's qualification games before that. But it's also got Carabao Cup dates, FA Cup dates, so you can get a bit of an idea of which fixtures are likely to be moved. Obviously with Europa League, all bar the first game, I think, are likely to be Thursday. I think the first group stage game could be a Wednesday or a Thursday. That first game also negates Spurs being... there's 2 dates for a potential Carabao Cup third round tie, and that that means that they can only be in one of those weeks. It's a 2-weeker that it could be. But yeah, have a little look. If you're trying to start setting up your ideas, because obviously there's going to be a lot of Sunday football with the Thursday games, that's going to have an impact on that as well. Although some were saying it potentially might not be. Oh, the other slightly interesting thing, depends whether this kind of thing interests you, there's a few midweek big games already scheduled in the Premier League. That second North London derby that I spoke of, and also Chelsea-Man City are all midweek ones, which I don't know whether the police would be delighted with or not. I mean, certainly they would have, they've kind of, they must have approved them for it to go through, but I don't know whether it's better to have, I suppose if it's a weekend, you've got longer to have a drink. I suppose some of the fans that might have caused trouble, I don't know. But yeah, so that's the fixtures. I think we can move on from them. I think we've exhausted every avenue of them. So I want to talk about Radu Drăgușin quickly, who was so good yesterday for Romania against Ukraine. I loved that. I got set the task at work, which was always a good one, of just essentially scouting him, watching him for the entire game. Not there, unfortunately, but off the TV. I love kind of doing that, really just focusing in on one player. And thankfully, he was brilliant. He was so good. Obviously, he's only 22 years old. This was his first big game, first tournament game. You know, Romania hadn't won a game since, I think it's more than 20 years at the Euros. So, and he was up against Ukraine, no mugs when it comes to attacking talent. They've got Artem Dovbyk, who is the Girona forward, who's had a brilliant season, 24 goals in 36 La Liga games. He's been linked with Arsenal and a couple of other clubs as well. So he was up front, gave him a little bit of a kind of a worry early on, Dragusin. He got him behind him, but couldn't control the ball. But from then on, he absolutely had him in his pocket. Obviously, they've got Chelsea's Mudryk as well, £88.5 million, Mikhailo Mudryk. Georgi Sudakov as well, Victor Zygankov. I've probably killed the pronunciation of that, so I apologise. But both of those players have been linked with various Premier League moves, Shakhtar Donetsk and Girona respectively. So 4 players there that are going to cause a lot of defences, a lot of problems. Dragusin was superb. I handled so much of it so well, whether it had the ball at his feet or whether he was off the ball, and his movement, his anticipation, his strength. It was exactly what I think he needed, just to show everyone, because we know how good he's going to be, and we could see it in like the later games at Spurs when he was starting to get more opportunities. And people at Genoa know exactly what he's like, and in the Serie A they know exactly what he's like. But maybe the commentators that cover the Premier League week in, week out, maybe just haven't seen how good he can be. And yeah, he was superb. Nicola Stanchel, who scored the fantastic goal for them in the first half, said afterwards in an interview, Dragusin is going to become one of the best defenders in the world. And I really hope that's the case. And it's in a Tottenham shirt as well. Because, yeah, this was a big day on the big stage for him. He had this really good partnership on the day with the very experienced Andre Burka, who, or it might be Burcha, who plays for the Saudi side, Al Okdood. I'm getting some of the names I'm having to say today. I'm absolutely going to kill them all. I'm sorry. But yeah, Dragusin stats, if you're interested, 10 clearances during the game, which was double the most of the next person, which was Burcha. He managed to also block 2 shots, make 1 interception, won 2 aerial duels, and had an 88.9 pass success rate. He just became more and more assured as the game wore on. He was so good. Everything that was kind of thrown at him, he either headed it away, got his foot to it. There were a few crosses when he got to. There was one really good moment when he kind of was slightly out of position but raced back and made this flying block. And then he just like roared at the Romania fans behind the goal who absolutely love him. And they were chanting his name loads of times throughout the game. Yeah, and I wondered whether that moment when he kind of roared his delights, whether that was anything to do with Guillermo Vicario. You might remember me saying a couple of weeks back when I interviewed him in Melbourne, I asked him about the kind of celebrations he does with the defenders after they make some kind of, even just a small defensive moment that ends up being important. And he said he encourages that among the defenders to really celebrate defensive blocks and tackles and everything like a goal. And he may well have done that before, Dragusin, but I wonder whether just in that moment a little bit of Vicario kind of in his back of his mind made him do it. I don't know, but no, he was excellent, and he went on this brilliant run as well. They had a counter attack, and he just flew off down the left hand side. Ended up getting the ball, did a nice little dribble inside, got caught for a free kick. And it was funny because the commentator, I can't remember who it was now, but they said, oh, you know, we haven't got to see much of that in the Premier League, or the Spurs fans haven't got to see much of that. And I was kind of thinking, we have. He's actually done a few of those, and they've been very impressive. It's a bit like Van de Ven and Romero in that aspect, that they all love to just kind of take the ball on and motor with it. And yeah, and actually there was an interesting little aside that James McFadden, who was the co-commentator, the former Everton player, he said that he'd been watching before, and in the warm-up before the game, Dragusin was in with the Romania's attacking players doing the crossing and finishing drills as well, which I thought was a really fascinating insight into when we see before a Premier League game, for instance, we wouldn't see the centre-backs getting involved in that sort of thing. So it kind of clearly shows that he's just, I guess, wants to improve his all-round game, and also there was a bit of a plan for him to get into attacking areas if he could. But yeah, they defended so well. And interestingly, as well as the fact that I think a lot of people then started talking about the back three. I think that was because Mark Chapman, the host of the show, that'd be BBC actually, not ITV, wouldn't it? Was saying that you know, Romero, Van de Ven, and Dragusin would be a back three that would maybe be the best in the Premier League, and especially when you chuck Porro and Udogie in there as the wing backs. And you know, Danny Murphy said, "Oh yeah, it would be one that nobody would want to come up against," and that started the kind of debate on social media about it. Yes, as an option, my personal opinion, yes, as an option at times, but I would also urge caution. Having said there's a million games to play next season, Dragusin, regardless, will get lots of game time. Romero and Van der Ven are not going to be fit in every game. It's not going to work like that. And also he will have to alternate Postecoglou. Interestingly, their next game, Romania, is against Belgium, and one of the ITV pundits for that will be Ange Postecoglou. So we'll get to hear, hopefully, some insights into him. You would think that they'll get him to really give a kind of a deeper insight into him, and also just looking forward to seeing how he interacts with Keane, Neville, Wright, people like that, and, as a pundit. But I think he's doing 2 other games after that. I think maybe one of them is one of the games in the last group, last day of the England group. So and then obviously he'll be back to pre-season with Spurs. But yeah, so Dragusin, fantastic. It was exactly what you needed. The pundits raved about him afterwards. Ashley Williams said he was the man of the match, and he just grew and grew into the game. And that's a fellow centre back, former Wales international. And yeah, it was just a big moment for him, and it just kind of, I'm sure Postecoglou knows exactly what he's got in him anyway. He has raved about him enough. But I think just a little reminder of, hey, you've got a well-respected kind of player that is growing in the global game now. So you can't just let him sit there on the sidelines. There's got to be more game time, which there will be, naturally anyway. Excuse me, there's going to be a lot of coughing in this one. Also this week, I did a little piece on the fact that Spurs have got this little £18 million sponsorship plug to fill this summer, because they've got 2 deals that are coming to an end, or actually both have come to an end, and they are their 3rd and 4th most lucrative sponsorship deals at the club, behind AIA and Nike agreements that they've got. First one you'll be well aware of is the Getir deal. That's obviously been out there in the news about their struggles, and also slightly worryingly, Sky News reported, I think last month, that they still owed Spurs £5 million. So no word on that as of this time of whether that has been paid back or not. But that deal was meant to come to an end this summer anyway, and it's kind of, this is one of the other things about these sponsorship deals that are coming to an end, is that everything has kind of shot up in the world of sponsorship valuations and things like that anyway. So while on the surface of it, it's like, ooh, that's kind of guaranteed income that's not coming in, although obviously with Getir there's a few more issues there. It is actually maybe coming at a time when Spurs can maybe get more than they were getting in those current deals. And a good example of that is, it looks like BetMGM are going to come in and take over as the new training wear sponsors from Getir. That seems to be the case in a multi-year deal. And the report seems to suggest that will be a £10 million a season deal rather than the £8 million a season deal that apparently they had with Getir. So you might remember that Premier League clubs agreed last year to remove gambling logos from matchday shirts from 26-27 season onwards, but that doesn't actually apply to training wear, sleeve sponsorship and advertising around the stadium and training grounds. So this kind of, is one of those that is not part of that. They entered the UK market last year, and they've got a number of smaller sponsorship deals with Man City, Newcastle and Wolves, but obviously will become more prominent with a training wear deal with Spurs. So when that comes in, we shall see, but it does appear that it is going to be then. The other deal that is coming to an end is the shirt sleeve sponsorship deal, which was with Cinch. So Cinch, if you're not aware, they're like a car selling platform. They agreed a 5-year deal back in 2021 with Spurs. However, are believed to be exercising an early exit option on it this year, which apparently they've done exactly the same with the Scottish Premier League Premiership up there, where they had a deal when they've come out of that one a little bit earlier, as they kind of pull back on their sponsorship commitments, I think is the official line. So again, that was linked, that was reported at the time back in 2021 as being the 3rd most lucrative sponsorship deal in the club and was worth $10 million a year. Again, I think times have changed even in those 3 years. Certainly Spurs, you might remember, were involved in some talks with SA Tourism, which is the tourism arm of the South African government, about a potential shirt sleeve sponsorship. And that back then was around $14 million a year. That was, so it shows you the jump, and guessing. That didn't go through. There was some qualms, let's say, within South Africa about throwing that amount of money, which was in total £42.5 million worth, towards a Premier League club, when obviously, as all countries have, there's a lot of issues to fix within the country rather than chucking it on there for a little bit of tourism advertising. So that didn't happen. But then, so the plan is for Spurs to have sponsors in place before the season starts for both the training wear, which, like we said, seems to be like it's going to be at BetMGM, and a shirt sleeve sponsor as well. You might have noticed that when the home kit came out earlier this month, it had a little bit within the release that went out that said, for the 2024-25 season, all of our kits will be sold without the sleeve partner logo, and our training range will be sold without the training wear partner logo. These are excluded from retail inventory for the coming season. So that's actually another little thing to take into account, that when those previous partners did their deals, that included us or people who ever bought the kits or training kits having their logo across it as well. So whether that, I don't know, that'd be interesting, whether that takes anything off of it. I ended up contradicting myself, haven't I? But just thinking about that, I wonder whether it does. If you're wondering what the two most expensive deals are or how much they are for the club, AIA is 40 million a year. They signed a massive whopping £320 million deal in 2019 as an extension of the previous one until the end of the 26-27 season. And Nike is a massively long deal until 2033, which is a 15-year agreement, and that is 30 million a season. So 70 million from those two deals alone. Which is quite a bit of moolah. Of course, the biggest one of all that we're still waiting to see, although would it be bigger than that AIA? Well, we don't know. But, we'll see. Maybe one day, is, of course, the stadium naming rights deal, which, we await to see what happens with that. Obviously, if you might have missed it, Daniel Levy, in various public forums in the last couple of years, has suggested that actually they found far more financial benefit than they expected from having the name Tottenham Hotspur on the stadium than they were anticipating pre-construction, and it has led to further sponsorship opportunities as well, and obviously it's getting the name of the club out there and becoming a global thing. So that kind of has brought less of a rush and panic to try and get any deal, and now they can comfortably, I guess, wait for the perfect deal. We shall see when and if that ever happens. So yeah, I mean, any extra money coming into the club, going back into the first team, and the transfer budget will be very, very welcome, of course. Something that is less welcome, far less welcome, and I've got to touch on it, is Rodrigo Bentancur and his utterly stupid comment he made in an interview back in Uruguay. I'm going to read you out the words rather than trying to paraphrase. I got a excellent South American reporter to translate it for me, who I know and trust and speaks absolutely perfect English, better than my English. So this is a little transcript. I need like 11 seconds of this interview, but this is how it works. So the reporter says, "Can you get me the shirt from the Korean?" To which Bentancur says, "Sonny." The reporter says, "Or any other champion?" To which Bentancur says, "Or any cousin of Sonny. They all look more or less the same." To which the reporter says, "Yes, of course." It's just an utterly stupid thing to say. I'm sure there was no malice or intent to cause any kind of offence, but those words, as they are, do take the form of a racist sentence. They do. The words together are a racist sentence. And I'm not saying that Bentancur is a racist, but those words together do form a sentence that is like that. That is a racist sentence. It is suggesting that, in his words, Koreans all look more or less the same. And look, just saying that anyone of any nationality or race all look the same, it's doing that. There's no getting away from it. I made my feelings very clear about it all on social media, and I got so many excuses chucked back at me. It was only a joke. That was one. Yes, that clearly was the intention, but it's a terrible, awful joke. I got told that people nowadays are all snowflakes and they're woke. I got told that That's just the way people talk in Uruguay. It's absolutely fine. It's a cultural thing. I got told that English people are hypocrites, that how dare they mention anything that might be construed as racist because of everything that happened in England's countries past with, with the empire and all the things that happened in that. I don't get that logic whatsoever. That's almost to say, like, no American person can point out any racism because their country has had some quite, obviously public instances of racism and things like that. And like every country has, it's just a terrible way of looking at it. Oh yeah, something happened way in the past, or even is still happening in a country, but that means you can't call out something as wrong. That's a terrible way of looking at it. It really is. I've even had some people saying, as I guess I'm doing now, that by even commenting on it or mentioning it, I'm drawing attention to it. I'm sorry, but that's daft as well. Bentancur put out an apology for doing it to 1.8 million followers on social media. I was hardly spreading it. I don't have that kind of reach whatsoever. And I just don't understand, why would you hide something like that? Why would you not discuss something about that? Why something like that needs, I think, to be discussed, because it just keeps happening in the world and it's so rubbish. I should read out. I've mentioned his apology. I should read it out. So as it started to kind of gain traction on social media, and a lot of kind of, I think, Korean people noticed it as well. There was an apology that went out. It's an Instagram story, so technically a temporary 24-hour apology that said, "Sonny brother," technically spelt Sony, but that doesn't really matter. "Sonny brother, I apologise to you for what happened. It was just a very bad joke. You know what? I love you, and I would never disrespect you or hurt you or anyone else. I love you, brother." So I guess if you're going to take one positive, there was that he apologised reasonably quickly. That's something. That shouldn't be dismissed. That was something. That's acknowledging that it was not right. That's something. And look, I get that there's a tribal nature to this as well, in terms of Tottenham fans wanting to be protective of one of their players, and I guess a thing of Uruguayan people as well wading into it. I had quite a few. I presumed they had Uruguayan flags in their bio, so I'm guessing they were from Uruguay. And I can understand this protective nature and gathering around someone, but you can't sweep something like that under the carpet. Look, I love Bentancur as a player. He's a fantastic player, and I'm so excited about kind of how he will be under Postecoglou when he is fully sharp and fit and everything. But it does not, that's a separate thing. That doesn't stop me seeing something as an utterly stupid thing to say. That, look, we would never see that said in an interview over here, any kind of Premier League interview. And there's a reason for that, because it's wrong. It is. And, just trying to kind of fob it off as, oh, it was just a joke, is just diminishing the effect it can have on other people. There's this, I know a lot of Korean people, and some of them I count as friends as well, who were offended by the comment. And ultimately, that's where it lies, I guess, is that you can come up with as many excuses as you like, I suppose, but it always feels like the people that are quickest to say that something isn't offensive are the ones who wouldn't be offended by it. It's always like, I'm telling you what is right and wrong. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't really work like that. I guess in a way, I suppose I'm telling people what is right and wrong as well, in my opinion. But as I said, speaking to the people that have been affected by that, there are people that are upset and they are outraged by it. And yeah, I don't like it at all. I do. I feel like the apology itself also missed a major thing, in that it was only an apology to Sonny. Technically he's insulting Korean people in general with that as well. It should have been a wider apology. And look, this might be controversial, but I actually don't think enough was made of it, or enough people spoke about it. And look, I'm not trying to muck spread and saying everyone come on, but all I'm trying to say is, and again, this might be a bit controversial, but perhaps, and this is something that some Korean people said to me, and I couldn't really disagree with it, that had it been a comment about maybe someone who's another nationality or race, perhaps a lot more people would have weighed in than, I guess just a few. And I can't really disagree with that. I don't know why that is, and why that is the case. that something kind of aimed at Korean people would get less of people kind of coming in and saying that's wrong. But look, I'm sure Bentancur and Sonny will be absolutely fine. They've always seemed very close just from the outside, kind of looking in. The club have told me they're dealing with it internally, as is always the way with these things. I think there will be a problem that comes later next month, and of course that is because Spurs visit South Korea. And whether Bentancur is there or not, it will be an issue, I think, because Bentancur will very much, his attendance will be dependent on how far Uruguay get in the Copa America. But Sonny will be there. Sonny is the figurehead of Tottenham as its captain, and he is a hero to just so many Korean people and so many people across Asia and so many people outside Asia as well. So he is going to get asked about it. I'm not saying it will be me, but Korean journalists will want to know, because it was a moment, like I said, that offended a lot of people. And just because you can't see that because you're not in Korea doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And that's, sorry, you can see it frustrates me. I just don't understand how this all still happens. This kind of feeling like, oh, but that's a culture over there, or that's this and that and that. But it doesn't matter if you're a public speaking figure and you're talking about someone. It still is airing a view that is just so unnecessary and wrong. But yeah, and also it comes in in the same month when a Nottingham Forest fan was banned for 3 years for racist abuse towards Sonny at the City Ground back in December. The same fan also was shouting anti-Semitic abuse at Spurs fans as well. And it just kind of feels like, does he really need to have to deal with questions about daft things said from his own teammates, whether it was a joke or not? So, yeah. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say on it. And look, I know I'm going to get comments in this. I'm going to get comments from people saying that I've made too much of it. But I just don't agree. And I will never agree. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that offends you, I guess. I'm not doing a temporary Instagram story apology for it. But there you go. Anyway, let's move on to other matters. Transfers and the like. We've got this kind of weird period right now where there's no getting away from it. The Euros and Copa America are definitely slowing down a lot of potential moves. They are. It's there. You can see it. We can see it across the board. Like I said, it's not just Spurs. It's very much across the board. There's been very few. If anything, Spurs, I guess, getting the Timo Werner deal done earlier in the window is probably one of the rare kind of moves to have actually got through. There have been some. I'm not saying there haven't been any, but certainly there's not too many. And I've spoken to various agents and people around players that have said similar, that, oh yeah, after the after the Euros and Copa America, stuff will kind of hot up with this player or that player, or it's kind of like a bit of a merry-go-round. A lot of clubs are waiting on one particular move, and that either frees up funds or whatever, or it kickstarts a space in another team. And there's so much interconnected. So of course, we've had so much talk about Aberi Eze and Conor Gallagher. They are slap bang in the middle of a tournament right now. So I'm sure if Spurs did want to push through moves for either of those players, and of course they're players that they like, then you could, I suppose, do a lot of the groundwork with the clubs and the representatives as well. That is the key thing right now. It's a lot of it is between reps and clubs. There's very little, you'd be surprised, there's very little club to club talking right now. Emerson Royale's a good example of that as well. From everything I understand from speaking to people around the potential kind of AC Milan move, is that a lot, or pretty much almost all of it, has thus far been contained between reps and clubs rather than club to club. It's very much, from what I see, seems to be a between reps thing right now. But that is how these things work. Honestly, it is. I've spoken to so many people around these things at various clubs and around various players, is that often the clubs probably won't even get in contact until maybe 24 to 48 hours before a deal happens. They might put in an early some kind of offer that is laughed at or something like that, or not laughed, or just is dismissed out of hand, and then they'll come back later. But often everything is done between the reps going, it's a bit like, the person in the middle, isn't it? Oh, by the way, they said they might go to that. Would you be willing to do that? Maybe. It's such a funny kind of way of doing things, isn't it, that we're probably not used to as much in the real world, as it were. So yeah, very little. The tournaments are kind of stopping a lot of the stuff. There was stuff about Ivan Toney this week, which that was swatted down very quickly from all sides of that potential deal about a rejected bid and personal terms being agreed and all this sort of stuff. Just pretty much all sides swatted that one away quite quickly. We had Romero and Real Madrid. That was only came from one report in Argentina. I've been trying to check whether the Spanish media, because we know they're quite, how do I put this, passionate about their reporting. And, the Madrid papers will be very big on something if it is a thing. And interestingly, it hasn't really spread to the Madrid media that I've seen. But certainly when anything came out about Real Madrid interest in Spurs, it was, in Romero, it was, very much Spurs distanced themselves from it, and it was all kind of swatted away. And he's such a key player for Postecoglou. Postecoglou has said, he's everything in Romero is what he wants in the rest of his team. He is aggressive, he is passionate, he wants to win. He is a win. He's a winner. He's a World Cup winner. He's a Copa America winner, hoping to retain it with Argentina. It's you would be mad to sell him, in my view, absolutely mad. And it would cost huge money as well. 3 years left on his contract. It would be a crazy move for me. Even again, people might say, "Oh, but you've got Dragusin and Van der Ven." Again, got so many matches Spurs have got next season. You need another one, not taken away from it. So, like I've said previously, while this month has been quiet thus far, I do feel like we're going to end up with a bit of a mini deadline day coming at the end of this month because of those financial fair play deadlines that a lot of clubs will have, and that may spark a little bit of a merry-go-round of its own. And look, Postecoglou wants a signing or two at least in before pre-season starts. He said that, so he did acknowledge it would be difficult, but still, it's they have to get a couple in. There are a lot of players not at tournaments this year that can be kind of got. I guess in Spurs' case, there are some outgoings they'll probably want to get done as well, who are at tournaments like Højbjerg. I saw his new agent came out and was very vocal about essentially saying there's lots of offers for him. I'm always, this is very much the cynical side of me. Yeah, that's probably the best way of saying it. It's slightly cynical when an agent comes out publicly on the record, especially when it's kind of quite a lengthy thing, because certainly in my kind of experience, agents don't like to be front and centre of stuff. They don't like to have their name out there. They don't like to be publicly talking about something. They might say the odd thing for a little bit of guidance and often, to stop like daft stuff getting out there. But I do sometimes wonder when one speaks publicly, is that maybe more kind of like rustling up some interest? There's certainly been a lot of chat with Højbjerg and Fenerbahce and Mourinho. And, I'm sure he would love to work under Mourinho again, but also I would also probably imagine that he would maybe want to play in a stronger league. Probably feels that he could play. There's been, previous interest with Atletico Madrid, clubs in Italy as well. We've been looking at Bayern Munich, have been linked with him again, a return there. So whether this is maybe the agent saying, hello, don't forget him, kind of thing, I don't know. I could be absolutely being completely wrong there, and it may just be a simple, there was an interview opportunity and it happened. But so it could be that with Højbjerg, with Lascelles, so that's kind of more money to come in that they can then put towards other deals or not. I don't know. But that's me speculating before anyone says, Spurs have to sell to buy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's more money to go towards it. But these pesky tournaments are getting in the way, I think, of some things. You kind of had to get a deal done. But I think, some of those players we've just spoken about, the likes of Eze and Gallagher, Palace have got no desperate need to sell right now. Chelsea seem to think that there's no desperate need to sell because of various ways they've got around it. The whole, profit and sustainability rules. With talk, I think they sold their training ground and little things like that to themselves. Essentially, I don't know. I don't know exact ins and outs, but there's some chat that they've managed to get around it. But there's other kind of players who could be heading off sooner or later. Joe Rodon, I reported this week, a lot of interest in Joe Rodon, who obviously has had a terrific season at Leeds. All three teams, unfortunately, that pipped Leeds to promotion to the Premier League, I understand, are interested in him. Ipswich, I think I said in a previous video, Kieran McKenna has really liked him for a little while and was very keen to try and bring him into Ipswich last summer, and now he's one of the interested parties in doing that again. Leicester, from what I understand, they were really keen to bring him in before Maresca left for Chelsea. Their recruitment team really like him. And interestingly, I saw a report just before I came in that Graham Potter looks like he's closing in on that job, certainly according to one report. If he does, that's probably quite good for that potential move as well, because he was Joe Rodon's boss at Swansea. I think it was for a season. So he will know him very well as well. And funny enough, Steve Cooper, who also managed him at Swansea, is another one of the names that was linked with the job as well. So either way, that's a bit of a win-win for Joe Rodon. And then there's Southampton, who beat Leeds in the playoff final. I understand that they really like him as well. And then, of course, there's Leeds, who Joe Rodon had a terrific season, really enjoyed himself at Leeds. And I think had they gone up, that would have been quite an easy decision to make for all parties. But I just think it's probably a slimmer chance at this moment in time because there's Premier League interest. And also, I think Leeds have to raise a little bit of money because obviously they've missed out on the riches that come with the Premier League. So, yeah, keep an eye on what happens with Joe Rodon. But certainly that interest is exactly why Spurs took up the option to extend his deal by another year. He is very much a man in demand. And really pleasingly, and I know this doesn't affect Spurs in any way, another man in demand looks to be Ryan Sessegnon, and he is currently doing like a fitness, or he has been doing a strength and conditioning fitness camp in Portugal to get himself ready for his next chapter in his next season. And from what I understand, there's quite a few teams in the Premier League and the Bundesliga looking at Sess. My thoughts on Sess. I just feel it's so incredibly unfortunate. Hopefully the surgery he's had on either leg or both legs will, as they hope, prevent the reoccurrence that has just stuffed his career for the last 4 or 5 years or so. 5 years at Spurs, and what did I say? Something like 26 Premier League starts, something like that. It's obviously just so, and you can see he was heartbroken every time it happened, and when he left, having not been able to do what he needed to do. And the club and him, it was just a case, I think, of a fresh start for both of them. From what I understand, he would prefer to remain in England. He became dad last year, and whether that plays a part or not, just being settled in this country, I don't know. He did go to Hoffenheim and have a terrific loan season in Germany, so it wouldn't be alien to him. But I think I saw just before I came on some of the media reports suggesting that West Ham and Fulham were among those looking at him. And some people might rightly, understandably, be asking, well, why didn't the Spurs take up the option they had to extend his deal if there was that interest? But there is a part of me that wonders, would there have been that sort of money and interest in him had someone had to pay a fee? Because it is a risk with him. Because, the fingers crossed, the hope is that this hamstring problems will not come back in his career. But we don't know that 100% at this moment. And, if you're getting someone like that on a free transfer, then perhaps it's not, it isn't as big as a risk of paying someone. So maybe that interest would not have been there. And let's say it didn't come along till January, or you even got a loan, what you're getting back on it is probably not going to warrant the wages that you're paying out in the meantime. So, yeah, similar to that. You could argue Japhet Tenganga's situation was slightly different. There was a little bit of interest in him, but again, was that interest because he would be available as a free transfer? I don't know. Spurs will get a little bit of money for him, won't they, for developing him? I feel like I remember it's something nominal. It's like 2%, something. I can't remember the exact percentage, but funnily enough, it was when I was at Bromma Poikana they were telling me about that. I think it is like a UEFA directive. So that's Sess. Best of luck to him. It really is. And you've heard me say before about Spurs looking at other centre-backs to come in, a 4th centre-back that Postecoglou wants, and I've mentioned that I would imagine, and from what I understand, it would be more likely to be someone that is a bit versatile and can potentially cover a fullback role. And interestingly, talking about talkative agents, Dragusin's agent, Florin Manea, has been speaking again. I'm guessing someone must have asked him, I think it was in Italy, about essentially about Dragusin playing well, but also, is there a worry at Spurs that they might bring in someone else because they've been linked with a couple of defenders in Serie A as well? That, is he worried? And he said, from what I know, Spurs are not looking for a pure central defender. They're more looking for a versatile defender, which is essentially what we've been saying. In any case, Dragusin is ready for anything. He is not afraid of the competition. I'm not worried because such a strong defender cannot be stopped. His growth cannot be slowed down. Tottenham have placed their trust in him, and in Serie A he faced very strong attackers. Yeah, you heard me say at the top of this, I think he's going to have a big season this year. I think he's really going to have a lot to get his teeth into in terms of matches and minutes, and could emerge as a real star for Spurs, which, fingers crossed, gets through this tournament. Lots more praise about him, and no injuries, please. That is another thing about this tournament as well, is that, we talk about the need for people to get in there early and try and get signings done before tournaments, which is absolutely right. And I think Dragusin is a great example of that. Had Spurs dillied and dallied and not gone in for him until this summer, his price shot up already. One match at the Euros and his price, Spurs got him for 25 million, I think it was. He's actually the most expensive Romanian player ever. He's going to be worth way more than that this summer. If someone wanted to come to Spurs and take him straight off their hands, he's probably a 35, 40 million pound player after one game. That's the way football works, because he's proved on the big stage he can do it. But Spurs player, and hopefully will do very well in the years to come. Absolutely. What else have we got? Actually, just talking about that is talking about the centre backs and looking at potential ones and ones that are versatile. That is why we mentioned before Hiroku Ito that they were looking at, who obviously has gone to Bayern since then, but that was a player who could play, I think it was left back as well as centre back. And there's been links with Bologna's Riccardo Calafiori, who's 22-year-old, once again, can play as a left back as well as a centre back. I'd imagine that would be a tough one to do. They've got Champions League football, haven't they, Bologna next season? So, that's a... why would you want to leave? To come to Spurs and essentially be with a really tough bunch of other players in Romero, Van de Ven and Dragusin now we've seen as well, or the rest of the world has seen. I do think, and I wrote that in a piece this week, that I think whoever comes in that full centre-back position, it's not going to be a superstar, big money signing. The only way I can see it being a big money signing is if it's a player who just desperately wants to be a Premier League player and wants to take that step. And I guess believes in themselves as well, like Dragusin did. Dragusin turned down Bayern Munich, even though he knew at Spurs he had Van de Ven and Romero in those spots. So it could be that someone like that. For me, I would wonder if it's going to be someone who it is a bit of a step up for, who maybe is a younger player. I don't know. I know certainly one player that they've had a little look at has been Rav van der Berg at Middlesbrough, who's their player of the year and young player of the year after last season. Interestingly, he can actually play right back as well, I think, too. So I'm not saying they're going to go for him, but he's certainly a player that they have scouted over the last season or so, and he is very kind of highly rated after a very good season, albeit in the Championship. But I wonder whether that kind of versatility is looked at as well. But it is perhaps a coincidence. Again, another versatile player. So fullback links. There's been a few this week, haven't there? Vanderson at Monaco. He's been linked a little bit before, but it seems to have kind of got stronger again. He turns 23 on Friday. Brazilian player. He would cost a fair chunk more. That Spurs are kind of reportedly looking for around, actually not reportedly, I've heard this from non-reporting angles as well, that they are looking for around 21 million for him, with potential, essentially 21 million seems to be the thing. From all the talk, it seems that Vanderson would be worth a fair chunk more than that. So you would be spending more. I mean, he's got 4 years left on the deal. He only signed 4 months ago. So he would be an expensive purchase to kind of rotate with Pedro Porro. That's not to say that's a bad thing to do, but just saying that he would be. He's had a bit of a fragmented season slightly. Still a decent season, but I think he's had a knee injury and maybe a hip injury. I'm trying to remember what it was. But yeah, not played probably as many minutes as he would have wanted to this season. But yeah, a very talented young player by all accounts. And then another piece that I wrote this week that I know Spurs are very closely watching and strongly interested in Archie Gray at Leeds, although I should stress, so are most of the top clubs, not only in the Premier League, but I think across Europe right now. He is a brilliant young player. He's only just turned 18 in March, and he played 52 times for Leeds last season. And what's brilliant about him, and I should stress, before I can already hear some people going, oh great, a Championship player, cheap Jack Clark type football transfer. The talk about Archie Gray is that, you're looking at maybe 40, even 50 million pounds for him. He is going to be a sensational talent. And I hate to use this comparison because of hindsight and what's happened, obviously, with injuries. But you might remember back in 2019, Ryan Sessegnon was the young player that a lot of Europe and the top clubs in the Premier League wanted. Kind of feels like Archie Gray is one of those players right now. He's so versatile. He's played defensive midfield for Leeds, box-to-box midfield for Leeds, attacking player for Leeds, and also a massive chunk of the season as their right-back. It was kind of him, really, that stopped Jed Spence getting any real game time when he was on loan in the first half of the season, and he ended up, obviously, heading back to Spurs and then on to Genoa. But, yeah, I think, personally, this is only my opinion, and look, I think if Spurs even showed that they were going in for Archie Gray, I think the rest of the Premier League's elite would pounce immediately. But for me, a guy that can play in midfield is a natural midfielder. That's where he played in the academy. Stick him as a right back. That's your Postecoglou inverted right back. He can do everything that is asked of that role. He would be phenomenal in it and a real perfect understudy / ready for the now kind of option with Pedro Porro. But yeah. Whether Spurs end up pushing through any kind of real strong interest they have on him, I don't know. But and also, from the flip side of it as well, why would he want to leave Leeds right now? He is playing week in, week out for them. He is adored there. He will want to get them into the Premier League after the heartbreak of, playoff final and it not happening for them. And with Leeds, unless they really have to sell, some people have told me that they do. Some people have told me that they don't. Obviously, like I said, they've missed out on all the masses of promotion money you get from coming into the Premier League. But at 18 years old, he's probably one of those players you don't want to lose. He's a young, real star of the future and a homegrown star of the future as well. And maybe if I am him, we mentioned his name there, he probably is thinking, like, what did you do to Jack Clark? You shoved him in a cupboard somewhere in the stadium and never used him. And yeah, poor Jack Clark. It took him to get out of the club and to Sunderland to kind of re-spark and reignite his career again. So he is probably, unfortunately for Spurs now, maybe a little bit of a warning for some of the younger teenage players in the Championship to it's not always the best kind of time to make such a move at that age. Maybe wait a couple of years. But yeah, he is a fantastic young player. He really is. Talking to young players, only because I think this probably all happened after the last video I did. There was a suggestion that Spurs might be selling Will Lancashire. I think it was to Middlesbrough. Speaking to, again, everyone on every potential side of that deal, as I always like to try and do, Spurs got no intention of selling Will Lancashire this summer. He is very highly thought of. There are a long list of the clubs in the Championship and across Europe keen on taking him on a loan. That's a different thing. But, he's 19 years old. Just scored 32 goals in all competitions for the under-21s. How awful would that look if you had a player like that and you were like, yeah, we'll sell him? You just would be insanity. It would make no sense. It would be essentially sending a message throughout your whole academy of, yeah, play really well and we'll sell you. That's not the message you would send. So yeah, a number of the clubs in the Championship, including Middlesbrough, they are one of them, and across Europe believed to be interested in a loan move for him. I think that decision will be made in pre-season. I'm sure Postecoglou will want to have a little look again at some of these players and decide who goes on the tour and who doesn't. and then the next steps for them will be decided. And that's quite a few players. You've got Will Lancashire, you've got Jamie Donnelly as well. I technically would love to see get a loan move. I think it's kind of the right time for him. Who else we got? Alfie Devine, Ashley Phillips, both obviously had their loans last season. Alfie Devine at Port Vale, then Plymouth. Ashley Phillips joining him at Plymouth as well. Decisions got to be made on them. Alfie Dorrington, I don't think is going to be back from his hamstring surgery until August. So whether he's back in any kind of real training and action in time to get a loan move, might be best for him anyway to be at Spurs for that certainly first half of the season anyway. And that may be the thing that happens with a lot of the Spurs players, the young players, is that with the Europa League and the massive games and the chance maybe to get them on, certainly in minutes later on in those games, perhaps you keep them there for the first half of the season, and in January you decide, okay, now maybe you go out and get some first team football, which also getting some exposure in the Premier League and getting those minutes under your belt, that could be another one about Leicester close to appointing Graham Potter. So we shall see whether that has anything for Joe Rodon in mind. But yes, so I'm interested to see what happens with the young players and various ones indeed. So there you go. I think that's probably everything that needs to be said today, to be honest. Like I said, we're in this funny little period now where there's a lot of brinkmanship going on, a lot of representatives talking to clubs, but not too much club-to-club chatter. And as we start to kind of edge towards the end of the financial fair play year and the books having to be closed and various things, I think that's when you'll see some of the clubs get a little bit nervous and start to show their hand, as it were, and that's where maybe the whole knock-on effect Spurs kind of get moving as well. But it'll happen because there's so much to do. There's been quite a few departures already, the ones we've spoken about, and so much more to come. And we haven't even touched on Reguilon, who had obviously a very good loan at Brentford, which will have upped the interest in him. Jed Spence, Genoa, would love to take him back. And there's so many more in there as well. What will happen with Oliver Skipp, but also incomings as well. We know they want another attacking player. We know they want a midfielder, potentially, a number 8 and a number 6. We know that they want a centre back. We know that they want another fullback as well. There's so much more to kind of be done, but we are still very early days. It's kind of like, you can feel it. They're starting to grow the frustration of, why hasn't something happened? And as a journalist as well, myself, I want it to happen. But there is also the sense that, the transfer window technically only opened, 4 days ago? And that's not to say you can't do stuff before it, but we are very, very early in the process. There is a whole half this month left. There is the whole month of July as well before, while pre-season is still going on. The season doesn't start until mid-August. There's a lot of time to get deals done, and then obviously the transfer window closes at the end of August. So, what we have there, there's 2.5 months left to still do deals. So, yes, I would love everything to be done now. And I still think 1 or 2 deals will be done before pre-season gets up and running, and certainly before the tour begins to Japan and Korea. But yeah, it's yes, now, please. And don't worry, I'm in those numbers. I am in those numbers, but I understand it. I do. So, right. Lots of varied stuff we've spoken about there. There are going to be lots of comments, I'd imagine. And I'm sure people will be moaning at me about my Bentancur thoughts, but I'm sorry. I'm going to stick with them. I do wholeheartedly stand by them. But I'm sure it's something that can be moved on from. That's the most important thing as well. But that's not to do down just how offensive it was. But there you go. Right. Anyway, I'm going back into all of that. So lots more to come. Like I say, keep an eye on Postecoglou as a pundit. That'll be fun. I'm sure, as I said, we're doing these videos. Something could change. Something could happen this evening. Something could happen at any point in the coming days, and I shall jump back on and do another video. That is the beauty of the transfer window. I kind of left this one a little bit because I knew the fixture list was coming out, and I thought that would be a nice kind of start to it, and then hopefully some more stuff had happened, which hasn't too much, but there's enough in there to talk about, mainly interest at this point. But yeah, so there you go. Right, time to head off. Going to go get some dinner, actually. And yeah, in the days ahead, I'm sure I will be back on to do some kind of update on various aspects of the world of Tottenham Hotspur. So yeah, enjoy the Euros, enjoy the Copa America, which starts on Friday. If I don't speak to you before then, and yeah, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.